Fast cutting is good actually. While it is good to hold on a shot to build tension and focus on stuff long enough for your audience to be able to take it in and have a good look at it, shots less than a second long have an energy. Here is a close-up of my eye looking around. Notice how it pops quickly between one position and another rather than slowly tweening. Also, if somebody turns their head round fast, they tend to blink. It's as though the split second when you can see nothing but a motion blur isn't even worth looking at. So, fast cutscenes simulate how humans see fast scenes better than shaky cams. Also, it's cheap. For the live-action filmmaker, you can hide the fact that all you're really looking at is me walking down a street. For the 2D animator, you can hide the fact that most of the shots are little more than still images, some of which were drawn by my 4-year-old son Odin. And for the 3D animator...
Whoa, that's a lot of blend files for a few seconds of animation.
3 ways to fast cut in Blender.
1.
Keyframe the camera.
We can use keyframe animation to have the camera teleport from one position to another. This works fine unless you want motion blur. Then you get this frame that's just nothing but motion blur between each camera angle as the camera shifts. We can solve this by making the keyframe before the camera's teleportation have constant as its interpolation mode. And we also have to go to the motion blur settings and set position to start on frame, or, for that matter, end on frame.
3 ways to fast cut in Blender.
2.
Camera markers.
You could also set up several camera markers in your scene and swap between them with bind camera to marker. Activate the camera you want by selecting it and pressing Control Keypad 0, or you can use this menu at the top of the scene properties. And on the timeline, you go to Marker, Bind Camera to Markers. Then you get this little camera marker that means that it will swap to this camera at this point of time, and we can select another camera, same method, and go to this menu again, and another camera marker pops up, and these can be moved around and duplicated and all those kinds of goodness. The advantage here is we can have different settings on different cameras, and they can be parented to different objects, and they can have different sets of constraints on them if you want them to be pointing at something.
3 ways to fast cut in Blender.
3.
Enter the video sequence editor.
Here we have to create a new scene, and I'm going to call it Edit. We can swap out the 3D view for a video sequencer, and we set the sequencer to preview and press N so we get this side panel over here. On the timeline we can press Shift A for add, and what are we going to add? We're going to add a scene, and the previous scene is currently called Scene. You might have changed its name because who knows what you get up to. We can now cut this with the K key, and on each strip, if we go here, and we don't edit the one that's called camera, what we change instead, camera, and we can select one of the cameras, or if we want it to be controlled by those camera markers we were doing in part 2, then we just press this cross and leave it blank. So what's the advantage of this over the last one? If we want to have the same piece of animation viewed from a few different angles, we can have this one and then duplicate it and then swap it to this camera.